According to Newton's third law, for every action there is an equal and opposite reaction. To understand this, think about what happens when you drop a bouncy ball. As the bouncy ball hits the floor, it causes a downward force on the floor. This is the action. The floor reacts by pushing on the ball with the same force, but in the opposite direction, upward, causing it to bounce back up to you. Together, the floor and the ball form what's called the action-reaction pair.
Like you, be strong to hold the powers of the sun.
I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
Listen to Pavarotti.
Can I be your superhero?
Hello, welcome to The Revealing. I'm your host, Pavarotti, and I'm here to discuss the Idaho 4 case. And, you know, the observations of Sir Isaac Newton, because in the end, that's what he was really good at. Now, obviously, he was a very intelligent person that's created some, laws that still hold true to this day, even though it was, centuries ago when he made those observations and formulated his thoughts. But in the end, that's what Isaac Newton really excelled at, and that was observing things, right? So he would sit back and he would observe things, and then he would contemplate what he was seeing, and then he would formulate his laws based on that. And in the beginning, it talked about equal and opposite reactions, right? And that is a law, right? So why are we discussing that in this video? Because when you sit back and you look and you observe and then you contemplate, much like Isaac Newton did centuries ago, then you can, if you're familiar with the laws that he formulated for us, then you can apply that to what you are observing. And in the Idaho 4 case, it is not hard, not difficult at all, to apply those laws to what you are seeing. And we are specifically talking about equal and opposite reactions. So the action would be new information hits about the roommates, about what took place that night, new things that we have now learned that was testified to in the grand jury. So the reaction should be all of those sources in the very beginning that covered this case so strongly. And I've spent the last couple of days just going back to the initial coverage of this case by those very sources, the first weeks, excuse me, leading up to when Bryan Kohberger was arrested, and the way that they covered those things and the questions that they asked, the questions that they had, they were genuinely trying to figure this thing out. There's no doubt. They were questioning everything. So the action of the new information coming out, you would think would generate a reaction of those same individuals, those same entities going back to the very beginning and saying, wow, look, these questions we had back then, this sure doesn't fit what we were thinking happened. This is something totally different. In fact, this is on the edge of, conspiratorial of the things that we were talking about back then. But that is not the reaction that we see. The reaction that we see is very perplexing. And the action of the new information coming out has caused the reaction that I've tried to explain happens over and over again in the media. And it actually propels the reaction of like Mr. G all of a sudden doing a media tour, trying to steer the narrative away from questioning anything about the roommates in the case, right? No, stick to Bryan Kohberger. We're going to listen to a little bit of that interview that was done with Ashley Banfield by Mr. G. And it really brings me back, though, to something the Judge Hippler, said in the very first hearing that he had on this case. A lot of people forgot that. I didn't.
As I understand, when the stakes are high, sometimes victory seems to be the objective, when our first objective is to conform to the oaths that we've taken as members of the bar, as officers of this court. All right. I do have some matters with respect to scheduling that I want to go over today, but before I do that, I'd like to hear from you with respect to the matters that you either need to make me aware of or want to make me aware of. The other thing before I do that, though, I do know that Judge had entered a non-dissemination order. That still remains in place. And unless I, for some reason, remove that order, it will stay in place, and I expect it to be religiously adhered to by all parties, counsel, victims, counsel for the victims, by all parties, counsel, victims, counsel for the victims, victims, counsel for the victims, and I will not tolerate violations of that. Likewise, I know that much of the evidence in this case has been subject to orders sealing under that dissemination order or otherwise have been sealed by the court. I likewise expect everyone that has access to that information, whether it's sealed documents or information in sealed hearings or the information itself in the documents, to adhere to the confidentiality expected as it relates to those.
And tonight, two absolutely stunning revelations about the surviving housemates texting and talking in the wee hours of November 13th, 2022. Also, a rare peek into some grand jury testimony, something we don't often get to see. We knew that Dylan Mortensen, a surviving roommate, had texted an Uber driver just after 2 o'clock in the morning. That's about 2 hours before the murders happened. But now we know that she and three of her roommates, Bethany, Kaylee, and Maddie, all of whom had just arrived home from a night out, had actually contemplated going out again. The court document reads, and I quote, "At approximately 2 a.m., they met up in Kaylee's bedroom and talked for a while before going to bed. The fifth roommate, Xana Kernodle, who was out with her boyfriend, Ethan Chapin, was not home yet. The roommates debated going out to the food truck for late night snack, prompting Dylan to send a text at 2:10 a.m. to an Uber driver she knew to see if he was driving."
Now, you noticed Banfield's been on this thing since the very beginning. They've reported on the PCA 1,000 times. And look how she glosses over the fact that Xana Kernodle, who was out with her boyfriend Ethan Chapin, was not home yet at 2 a.m. She knows that that PCA says they were all in the house by 2 a.m., that Bethany, Ethan, and Xana got home before 2 a.m. She knows all that, but then she just reads that and glosses over it. So don't tell me that these people have 1 ounce of credibility.
Ultimately, however, the girls decided to just go to bed. Man, that brings to mind a lot of what ifs, doesn't it? What if they'd gone back out? What if they just decided, let's go, let's do it. It's 2 a.m., let's go get more food. Might that have changed the course of history? This is where I'm going to stop and bring in Steve Gonzalez. Steve is Kaylee Gonzalez's father. He's been a regular guest on the program. Steve, these were details that I found astounding. They seemed to put into place more details of a very confusing picture of what happened that night. And I often stop and I think about you and the other parents, and whether you get a heads up that this stuff is coming, whether you have someone who sits down with you and goes through it and helps you to sort through it. How do you receive this kind of information?
Let me answer that for him, Ashley. Yeah, he does. That's why he's on your show right now whenever stuff like this comes out. Damage control. Make up some stuff, Steve.
We normally get an email beforehand. We work back and forth. I don't think either party really had an understanding of how to really construct something where you can share information, but not too much information. But the communication's gotten a lot better. I've really
Yeah,
grew to like these guys. I mean,
you
I really
must.
care about that those people and all the work that they've done. So I think they've always tried to work towards communication, but I'm
Right,
sure they're very
right. Yeah,
busy, and it's not easy to always remember to keep us in the loop.
I think it is pretty easy, Steve, because anytime something comes out that everybody in the world should question, all of a sudden you're on these shows steering the conversation away from what everybody should be talking to or talking about.
You know, it was a surprise to me, Steve, to hear this detail that Bethany got a glimpse down the hall of what now appears to be Xana's open bedroom door, and Xana lying inside that bedroom door, and ran downstairs to Bethany's room. And then at one point, Bethany also saw that same image. But it's sort of just, it's flummoxing to think that they called friends, they called 911 before anybody sort of went to investigate what was happening in that bedroom with the door now open. We always assumed that it was closed and they couldn't get past it.
Yeah, that's definitely a puzzling part of it. But I always assume, you have somebody who's scared, girl, intoxicated. My own daughter, when my son was playing a prank on her, acting like he was being attacked, him and his mom.
Well, it is, isn't it?
Kaylee ran upstairs and hid under the bed and called me at work. So when people are scared and they're young, they don't think the same way as
Intoxicated
a
at
grown
noon the
adult
next
does.
day,
And
Steve.
I think
I
they
mean,
were
come on,
just
man. This is the next day.
thinking
This
that
isn't
something
that
bad
night.
had happened,
This is
but
the
they
next
didn't want to
day.
believe
She's
it.
not intoxicated anymore.
They weren't really prepared to mentally accept what was happening. And I totally understand that, because it's not something that we're used to in Idaho. It's not
What
something
was that?
is common.
What?
It's not even. It's
What?
just
Whoa, whoa,
it's
whoa,
just
whoa.
unheard of.
Go
So
back.
I chalk it up to that, and I know that there's a lot of forensic, and there's a lot. These girls had their phones on. I already said way back in the day that you could tell when they went up the stairs and downstairs. This is all laid out. Every step has been retraced. So
Who plays a prank
it
like
didn't make a
that? That
difference
him and his
in the bigger
mom's being
picture.
attacked.
And
What is
I've
he
always said that there
saying
could be
right now?
blessings for late calls as well too.
Yeah. It's also just so jarring to get the detail that the girls were all together up in your daughter's room, chatting about, let's all go out again, 2 o'clock in the morning, let's go back to the food truck. And I'm not sure if you heard how I laid it out at the top of the show, but all I can think of is the what ifs, if they had actually decided to go. And I'm wondering how you're processing that information.
I knew a little bit of the details about that. I don't even talk about some of it just because I don't want to hurt some of the people, that are involved in this. If, certain people would have got picked up phones, all those type of things, those are what ifs. But I think what it really goes to your audience is these girls were best friends. And even the last moments of my daughter and Maddie's, they were surrounded with friends and they were in their beds. So just keep that in mind, because there's going to be probably some people are going to try to drag these surviving people through the mud. And up to their very last moments, they were hanging out with these, the people who passed away, planning on doing something fun. And my daughter came down there to hang out with one of those girls. And that's the reality of it. That's the truth of it, not some of the speculation that you're going to eventually hear about.
Yeah, and shame on those who have cast aspersions on these 2 surviving roommates who have been to hell and back. They're still there. They're not back. And how anyone could set upon them with ridiculous conspiracy theories is beyond the pale. There was something that you mentioned, I think a couple of days ago in an interview that sort of stood out to me. And that was that I think you had a chance to speak with the coroner and got a detail about one of the injuries that your daughter suffered at the hands of this killer. I think it was a punch to the face. Can you tell me what it is that you learned?
I don't go into all the details on it because I I want the court to bring it out. I want them to do it. But yes, I feel 2.5 years. The defense has a strategy to have everybody forget, and I'm here to make sure they don't forget. So when I do have to let stuff out, it's because I don't want people to forget that we have a monster. And yes, he
What did he just
one
say
of the
right
girls
there?
was a little more intoxicated. He was able to go after
Listen
that.
close.
Maddie May first, and my daughter woke up, and he struck her multiple times and broke her nose. And yeah, and there's a little bit more details to that, but I leave that to them in case that's something pertinent for them to know.
And then he drops some more bombshells like he dropped in that video, such as, well, now he says Kaylee was punched and her nose was broken. All right. Well, I'm seriously doubt that one of the roommates will be able to punch Kaylee and break her nose. Okay. That's going to be a man thing right there. Now, when we learn in the new docs that the defense experts are going to be testifying that, not only was there multiple perpetrators, but there was multiple weapons used. Now we hear about this punching thing from Mr. G. And instead of people questioning, because that should bring up more questions than answers, they go, oh my goodness, Kohberger's terrible. Really? Now that brings up even more questions than it answers. Because if Kaylee was punched, that means that she was awake, she was fighting, and it would be loud at that point. And then she's attacked with multiple weapons, and Dylan's 3 feet directly underneath them. And she doesn't hear any of that. All she hears is, well, I think the dog has woke me up. Give me a break.
By all parties, counsel, victims, counsel for the victims, counsel for the victims. And I will not tolerate violations of that.
So once again, just like Isaac Newton contemplated centuries ago that for every action there is an equal and opposite reaction. Action, new information comes out that actually sheds a little light on giving us the ability to get to the truth of the matter. Reaction, press tour by Mr. G steering the narrative and then dropping supposedly secret information. Reaction should be judge actually following through on what he said the first time that they went to court in his court on this matter. So now, Judge, are you going to be a man of your word, or does your word only apply to the defense? We shall see. Please like and subscribe to the channel. Post your comments, thoughts, criticisms. Till next time, Pavarotti's out.